Oh, I need to turn off the Wi-Fi.
Orientation is locked. So it needs to be this way.
Oh, Dave, no.
Yes, it is.
Let me see.
It is.
Oh, see in a minute. Hey everyone. I guess we're live now.
We are live.
Sorry about the camera orientation. On the cell phone it's locked this way and we can't turn it horizontal. So
Well, we have great lighting, so that's good.
yeah, at least there's that.
So we are vertical instead of horizontal, but we've got the lighting, and we're ready, and we are excited about this video. We've been talking about this video for a long time. We've got a lot of notes, and we've got people. Hey, hello, good evening, hello, howdy, yes.
Yes, howdy.
So hope y'all are having a good evening, and if you're from my channel and you're wondering why this traditional woman is not in the kitchen because it's dinner time, have you heard of early dinner? Yes, I did cook for my family before we started doing this. And now we're on Megan's channel, and take it away, Megan. Introduce yourself.
Okay. So yes.
To your own channel.
To my own channel, yes. Lacey's had more experience with live videos, so she's helping me here. So I am Megan, also known as Anarchia Miller. So I wanted to do a live video here with Lacey to talk about women in self-defense training. And I wanted to be a little more interactive with people so that you all can send us your questions and we can have a conversation about how to go about training that is more realistic for women. So my background, I've pursued self-defense for about 5 to 6 years now. I decided to go into it around the same time I got into the liberty movement, more so because I really wanted to empower myself as an individual. And to do that, I had to learn to protect my own physical being. So that's how I got into it. If you want to go into how you got into it.
I see that we already have a question. Because I am holding my phone, have notes, and keeping track of the chat, I think it will probably be easier if we answer questions as they come.
Yeah, so that way we don't lose
So I don't lose track. But it is on slow mode, so I will get to the question just after.
Oh, hi, Flores.
Flores. I don't know you, but hi, nice to meet you. I entered training because I grew up with the self-preservation idea. I grew up, in the country, redneck town, brothers who had guns, father who had guns. I kind of grew up with that survivalist mentality. And when I had kids, I just had this innate kind of feeling that I needed to protect my kids. My husband traveled with his work, and something in my head just, the way that I grew up and the way that I felt inside, I knew that I needed more than just target shooting. So the range that I was at, I met a man named Sonny Pazookas, and I told him what I wanted to learn because I knew I needed more than target shooting. and he laughed at me because I said I wanted to learn how to disarm somebody. And he laughed, and so then we had a one-on-one kind of, oh, you really want to learn? Well, is this what you want to learn? And I think he tried to rough me up a little bit, and I don't think he expected that I'd come back, and he scared me half to death. He really did. He's over there going, no, I didn't expect you to come back. But he turned me every which way and pointed a training gun at my head, and what would you do? What would you do? Did I do a good Russian accent? So it was a little frightening, but the mama bear, inside of me, and that innate self-preservation inside of me, I knew that I needed something more than target shooting. So I came back, and I was the only girl in the class until Megan came along, and then there was a budding romance.
Yes. Yes, then I moved to Texas to be with Sunny, and about a year and a half later we got engaged.
Yay, everybody say yay!
And now we're here.
And okay, so we have a question from Flores. In your opinions, what is one of the most glaring issues you guys see when it pertains to women in self-defense training? Do you want to go first, or?
Issues as far as like how instructors go about it, or how women go into it expecting, or I guess I could do both.
Well, some of this is already in our notes, and we've talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's really frustrating that I've seen, and I've gone through very different types of self-defense training, is that a lot of people try to do this one-size-fits-all technique-based self-defense training, where they, let's compare myself to a 180-pound guy. What works for him is not going to work for me. A lot of it is, brute strength based. That doesn't really apply to a lot of women. But we live in a politically correct culture to where women, I think instructors are worried that if women aren't treated the same, they're going to accuse them of being sexist or talking down to them. But I think, and I think instructors need to just be very individual based, and be honest with who they're teaching. Say, this may work for this guy, but because of you're a smaller person, it's probably not going to work for you, and you shouldn't rely on strength. And yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, we did have in our notes a couple of things that I think are equally important when we're talking about issues with women specifically and self-defense training. And one of them is feminism, because I think feminism does a horrible disservice to women, in all aspects of life, and men. But also, when we're talking about training, it's that it's a very kind of puffed up attitude of, I am woman, hear me roar, and then you go in and you're like, I can kick him in the nuts, and that's all feminism tells you, which is not, it's not realistic at all. Or the rape whistle, or the rape underwear, where they tell you you don't have to train at all because the responsibility is on men. And in a utopian society, as a traditionalist, as somebody who believes in traditional gender roles, men would be chivalrous, and women would it wouldn't be something that women have to take upon themselves, you know. But if you go over to my channel, I do plan to have a video defending the fact that a woman protecting her children and getting into self-defense training guns can be a traditional. It is very traditional for women to protect their children. So, but when we're talking about the rape whistle and the rape underwear and all this is put on men because men are the problem, then women go in and they have this puffed up attitude and they don't take training seriously, or they don't do it at all because it's all men's fault, right? So either they're not training, or they come in with this attitude of, you know, I am woman, hear me roar, and they don't take it seriously. Or, you know, like Megan was saying, feminism adds to the problem of the idea that men and women train the same, and they don't.
Yeah, and I think people are, you know, there are some biological differences, and I think it is important to acknowledge that we're motivated by different things as well. And I think the most dangerous thing about feminism is that it takes accountability off of the individual and puts it on society. Basically saying, this is not your fault, you shouldn't have to do anything about it, you just have to educate men not to rape. And on the individual level, the individual is capable of rejecting any kind of education. You can reject dogma, which everyone should reject dogma, but you can't just educate people not to rape and then expect that it will never happen. And that's I think the feminist approach to it is education, when really you should be, you only have power over your actions. And you know, I think Lacey and I would both agree on this. Our suggestion is that you prepare for the worst, because
Right.
you can't rely on people's good intention or other people's intentions. So.
Well, then the second part of my answer to that is, if you're a woman who has traditional conservative values and you're not a feminist and you don't go in there with that puffed up attitude, you might go in there with a very timid attitude, which is what I've run into problems while training is, and I've thought of this kind of being a fangirl of many different shows and different movies, that, you know, two actors who are married to other people will get close to each other and they might even kiss, and I'm like, how weird would that be? You know, and you're not kissing in training, but but when you're in training, you do have to get close to people. And I think, and we'll get into this in just a minute, but the type of training that we do, we don't square off and create distance with your opponent. We're taught to move into your opponent. That's where you can do the most damage. And when you move into your opponent as a woman with conservative traditional values, it's going to feel very awkward. And you might kind of want to create that space. And when that space is created, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're so timid of getting close to somebody. Like, one thing that I really want to stress to women who might want to go into training, which you should, is that you're going to have to get comfortable with being in close proximity to somebody of the opposite sex, somebody who you're not married to. But they
may not smell that great either.
And they don't, and they sweat. But the men that I've trained with are, you know, they might be rough and tough Russians, but they actually are, you know, they're gentlemen. They've always treated me well. You know, I think that we made a few jokes one time. Thank God Megan came around eventually, because I was the only woman with all these men around me, and I don't know how I didn't get raped, you know. But no, it's not men that are the problem. Men in training, from my experience, have been very chivalrous. I mean, I've heard a few words that I would have rather not, but but you need to get used to putting yourself in a male space and in close proximity to somebody who you're not married to, which is difficult at first if you're somebody of like a conservative background, but it will end up saving your life. And if you're confronted with that scenario of having to protect yourself and your children, your attacker's not going to care about your personal space.
And speaking of awkwardness, I don't know if you've had this experience too, but whenever I'm partnered up with someone for a drill, especially if it's someone that's much bigger than me, I feel bad for my partner because and this is something that I think women need to get over. I feel bad for my partner, like I'm not going to be a challenge enough for them to get something out of it. And one thing when you go into self-defense training is you really have to embrace selfishness. And women in general are encouraged, whether this is, some biological influences of being the caregiver or, social pressures. Women are encouraged to be a little more empathetic and worried about how everyone else is doing. In training, yeah, you want to be considerate of your partner. You want to make sure you're both getting something out of it, but you can't feel bad that your partner may not be getting something out of it. It's up to the other person to get something out of it. And you can look at it this way if it helps that person that you're partnered with. They might have, a daughter, a wife, or someone that they want to teach. And so they're kind of practicing being able to teach you or partner with you so that they can help the woman that they care about in their life. So that was one thing I had to get over, because I tend to feel really bad if I'm partnered with someone that is either a higher skill level or bigger than me. And
well, and they say the best way to learn is to teach. So I've been partnered with somebody who is bigger, stronger, more experienced than I am, but they might not know how to handle a certain situation or a certain move or scenario with somebody of my size and my skill level, my experience. So I'll see them kind of sit and think and kind of question what do I do? So it does help them. So I wouldn't feel too intimidated about your skill level, because like Megan said, it is their responsibility to get something out of the training. What I like about the training is that we are paired with people of different skill level. You don't train with the same person all the time. Like if Megan and I were going at it together all the time, that's not realistic. 9 times out of 10, she's not going to be the one that's attacking me. So,
and one thing that I think is good to consider, and I've gotten this from a lot of people, when you partner with people for long periods of time and they're on the same skill level, there's almost a level of predictability that you start to develop. Like you start to expect someone will react a certain way. If you're paired with someone that isn't as experienced in whatever type of training you're doing, there's a level of unpredictability there that may help you. For example, you're probably trained to do a drill a certain way and then someone does it differently and then that throws you off, but in real life you may not know the skill level of the person that you're having to defend yourself against. So again, don't worry too much about skill level.
right.
Question.
It seems like one of the trolls from my channel has come up, Adam Scott.
If you don't mind, ladies. Hey, Adam Scott, my name is Sonny Puzikas. Come see me. We'll talk about balls separately.
Okay, one of my subscribers, Young Dude, is Systema more effective than Krav Maga against attackers with a knife? Or why did you choose Systema over Krav Maga? I think this is a good time to address the Systema issue.
Well, Well, first of all, I've done both. I've done both Krav Maga and Systema. For the record, Sonny's training, he's not associated with Systema anymore. That doesn't mean that what he teaches is rooted. What he teaches is rooted in Systema, but it's his own thing now. The thing that bugged me about Krav Maga with knife defense was it was all about blocks. And when you have a very, someone with a blade going really quickly, in unpredictable ways, a block isn't going to, being able to catch someone's wrist or, exposing your arm for a block, you're going to get sliced. You probably get sliced multiple times. I'm not saying there isn't a good solution out there in Krav Maga, but I didn't see one that was practical. I mean, first of all, avoid anyone with a knife to begin with. Knife defense by itself is very difficult. Systema is more movement based to get around people at an angle. For example, what Sonny teaches, instead of trying to block or grab the knife, try to move into the person, move around them, and then if you can control the person from behind, it's hard for them to kind of stab you if you're right behind them.
And that's what Systema is rooted on, based on, is movement. Move. I think I've heard that a billion times in training, and you don't it sounds like something that should be very natural, something that you just do, something that's second nature, but it's not. When you're confronted with a knife coming at you, and especially somebody who's experienced and slashing, and your innate response is block. Oh, I don't want that knife at me. But what are you doing? So when
you're in the same spot, so the person can be stabbing you multiple times, and yeah.
Right. So Systema teaches you movement, and it's not just running away,
No.
but it's very subtle movements at an angle to where, see, if she's coming up against me with a knife and I subtly move, then I can do damage here. The knife is away from where I am. I very subtly moved at an angle, and you know what can happen? So that's Systema. Movement. You okay?
Yeah. We'll probably get asked to demonstrate.
Systema is a lot of movement. They emphasize breathing and relaxation, and so you can think, and then while you're moving, your hands just kind of fall where they may, and what can you do with it while they're there?
And the important part in training, and is do everything slow so that you're able to, because this is your time to do things slow and to be able to process things. Because I've noticed whenever I've practiced, sometimes when you overthink things or you're trying to think, you're trying to gather. I'm still trying to get out of the habit of not being so technique based. Whenever I'm trying to process something, I freeze. And who's not to say that's not going to happen in a real life situation unless you train not to freeze and try to process what's going on. So, yeah.
Right. See if we have another question. Does one have to be educated not to rape? This is from Peace, Love, and Anarchy.
Does one not have to be educated? Or
does one have to be educated not to rape? I would say that the fact that males are inherently rapists is a feminist lie. If we're talking about males. Now, I think that people are taught already through, if you follow a religion, if you follow a philosophy, if you follow some sort of moral, what is right and what is wrong, I think that people basically know not to murder, not to rape, not, I mean, it's kind of that in you. I think that there are people who are bad and make bad choices. I don't think that there needs to be a class set aside in college to turn men into non-rapists. I think that's silly. I don't think men are born rapists. I think that, learning about the men's rights movement and researching kind of the men's rights movement, there are a ton of women who will attack their male partners. It's not as well known. There are not, hardly any male domestic violence shelters. So there are bad people, and I think that's just the gist of it. There are bad people who make bad choices. I don't believe in a class or that people need to be taught how to rape and not rape. I think that's a way that the feminists try to demonize men. And our training is not, I'm training so I won't get raped by this evil patriarchy. My training is personal responsibility. It's even the aspect of it that's just the survivalist, the what would you do in a worst case scenario. It's not just about like rape. It's a carjacking or natural disaster or kidnapping or there's so many things that could go wrong. Break-ins. It for me, it's not, I think all men are gonna rape. That's not why I got into training. So that's the long answer. Short answer, I don't think that there needs to be some sort of government class to teach people not to rape.
Well, certainly the government is not going to prevent rape. Obviously, laws don't actually prevent anything. I think as long as men are properly socialized, they grow up in a culture that teaches certain values, if they teach respect for women, if they teach respect for the individual, I don't think that's a problem. I don't think men are inherently rapists. I think there's a big difference in tendencies based on what culture you grow up in, which ironically feminists attack Western culture a lot more than they attack other cultures where rape is a lot more prevalent and there's not really punishment, whether it be social or on the government level, for rape.
That's a good point. I think that rather than pitting the two genders against each other, we need to look at culture and what cultures have these values of women actually are beneath men. When in Western culture, there's this push for egalitarianism, but historically in Western culture, there's been this complementarianism between men and women. We have different roles. Now, in other cultures, women are definitely, obviously, that second class, and feminists don't care about that.
I think one major thing too is the difference with cultures. There's cultures that are more collectivist and cultures that are a little more individualistic. For example, Western cultures, they are more individualistic. That's why you see it. There's a lot more self-accountability in individualistic cultures. And that's why I think in Western cultures, you don't even have to teach men not to rape. They already know that they are accountable for their own actions and for their own. They can't just say, oh, I had this impulse and I did it. No, they know that they have to be accountable for their actions. And that society doesn't dictate necessarily what they can and cannot do. They decide for themselves, and I think it, yeah. I think we can move on to another question.
And I'm going to be the alt-writer who says that Western culture as a collective teaches better values. But, so, Young Dude says, would you still recommend learning Krav Maga? There is no system in my neighborhood.
So, I guess that brings up a good question, is like some training better than no training? If you're a guy, yeah, I mean, I would think taking some Krav classes and then just be skeptical about everything you learn. Try not to get pulled, and this is for any self-defense system that you're working under. Don't get pulled into the dogma, into thinking, I can only do this a certain way, I can only do this in this scenario. You could go in and try and challenge your instructors even to be a little more fluid.
And
I would still go if, yeah, on an individual level, if you feel like that you're benefiting in classes and it's not too dogmatic. Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to knock down Krav Maga, but I'm, just want to point out that anything that's technique based you should be really skeptical of, because I would suggest doing things that are a little more fluid. But yeah.
And I to women, since we're speaking about women in self-defense, my advice would be, if you get into training and you feel like you're being sold something, if you feel like you're being patronized, if you feel like you're not being taken seriously, if somebody doesn't put you through your paces and show you what is very realistic, and kind of keeps it at a superficial level because you don't want to get hurt, nobody wants to hurt the woman, but they want to sell you thousands of dollars worth of equipment. I mean, kind of just have a little bit of intellectual honesty and some awareness. So I personally don't have a lot of experience with different practices, but that's what I would think of when I go into somewhere, having kids, being at home with them, and things, walking around neighborhoods, being in different scenarios where my mind is thinking, I need realistic training. I need somebody, and I have been, to shove me against the wall, put their hand around my neck. And actually and it's not that, if you go into training, like we go into training, that you're just going to get picked up and thrown against the wall. It's not that bad. We go slower, so you know what you're doing, and you can learn, and you can progress as you keep coming back and keep learning. The point is, you don't want to go into somewhere and feel like you're paying hundreds or thousands of dollars for lip service, or for pink mace, or for a rape whistle. You want somebody who cares enough to show you the realistic side, because they do care. My experience has been, the men that I've trained with and the trainer Sonny, he cares. He cares that you go home alive, and that's what I would look for.
Another thing I would look for is there's two different mentalities that people tend to have. Either they have a system in place, and if you don't fit into it, or if it's not working for you, then they'll say something's wrong with you. It's kind of like looking at communism, for example. It's, there's a system that's supposed to be utopian, and, but if you don't fit in, or if you don't fit into it, then that means something's wrong with you. And you should be pursuing instructors and people that will actually look at what works for you rather than selling you a system or selling you dogma and then saying, no, this is supposed to work for everyone. You're just not doing it right. So I'd go into it like that. Obviously take criticism. Obviously some instructors will give you some helpful criticism. They'll try and tell you to do it better a certain way, but if they tell you, no, you have to do it this way, and if it's not working for you, you're doing it wrong. So be very skeptical about that kind of mindset.
And I've even had, when I was in training, say we're doing holds, and it's how to get out of this hold, and you can sit there for a minute and you can think about it and take that time to really process and put yourself in that scenario. What would I do? What should I do? Kind of play around with it, move your body, see what works. You don't want to force it, especially if you're a woman, you can't overpower a man. So you don't want to do something out of pure strength, because we aren't the same. So taking that time and figuring out what works for you, if you have to kind of move around with it and work with your partner and figure out what works. And the first thing or the second thing or the third thing you try might not work, but it's about trying to find what works. And your trainer, if he's a good trainer, will give you ideas. He'll help you. He'll sometimes he may come around and say, now, was that realistic? Is that really going to happen in real life? I don't think so. And then I've had Sunny came around and said, you got a weapon right there. And that's what I'm talking about, realistic. And I keep coming back to the word realistic, but...
Oh, by the way, make training realistic again.
Yes, make training realistic again.
Yeah, if you want one of these shirts, I put in a link down below if you're interested in these shirts. And so,
awesome.
Yeah, that's the goal. Make training realistic again.
Okay, Peace, Love, and Anarchy says, I agree, practice minimizes panic. Panic kills.
There was a previous question
from
Thomas Hollaby about the concealed carry options for females.
Oh. Thomas says, in your opinion, what is the status of concealed carry options for females? Do you think women are taken seriously in the industry?
Okay, yeah, I have a lot to say about this topic because I've tried many ways of concealed carrying for women. There's a lot of products out there. One thing I would highly encourage women to do, if you already have a few products, whether it be a purse, a certain kind of holster, try to train with it first before you just start wearing it and assume it's going to work. Because I've had multiple things. I had a concealed carry purse, and when I did force on force training, so using non-lethal weapons, practicing real life scenarios, I found that I couldn't draw the weapon as quickly as I needed to. It was awkward. If you're under attack, you really want to eliminate all the things that could go wrong. So I would say no, unless you have no other option. Of course, carrying, well, not always, but carrying is usually better than not carrying. I would suggest do not do concealed carry purses. I would say have your weapon on your body so that you have it with you at all times. I have made it so that I can carry, well, almost always appendix carry at all times. I brought a few of the things that I use.
Shall we show it our same guns?
Oh yeah.
She
carries we both carry a Glock 43, by the way.
show your gun.
Can you see the, okay.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, all right, so this is my first choice is the Berkut version 2.0 holster. I put a link to it in the description below. But this allows for, you have to, the thing about this, at least for now, is that you have to have a belt in order to carry it. And it moves with your body. So I'm actually extremely comfortable. I can sit down. I don't know if I can, you can see. I can lift my leg up. I can move around, and it doesn't really affect me. I'm comfortable. I don't get pinched, and it has the perfect angle for my wrist. So that when I'm drawing it, I don't have like this awkward, like if it's tilted more this way, I don't have like this awkward wrist alignment when I'm trying to draw. But if you draw more from, this is going to be a lot quicker, and your wrist is aligned and it's less awkward. So ladies, if you're wearing jeans one day, if you wear jeans a lot, get a holster like this that you can wear on a daily basis. If I'm wearing a dress or yoga pants for whatever reason, Green Force Tactical makes this holster, by the way. They also make these holsters with an ulti-clip. So you don't have the wrist alignment, but you can clip it onto yoga pants, to shorts, to any material. And it's a harder holster so that...
it's better if you have kids, small kids like me, if they're grabby.
If they're grabbing around your waist, or if someone attacks you or grabs you from behind, and they happen to get their finger, if you have a soft holster and they happen to get their finger in the trigger, it's not going to end well for you.
Yes.
Which is one of the... What I was
I don't have this yet, but I want this.
So this is what I like to wear under dresses. I actually wear them backwards. It's under tech, undercover. It's a soft holster. I have it inside out. There you go. It's a soft holster, so that's the only thing I really don't like about it, besides obviously wrist alignment too. But I can wear this under a dress, and as long as the dress is flowy, I can still carry appendix. I really like this product for that reason.
And we both carry Glock 43, right?
Yeah.
I learned on a 38 special revolver, a little bit more difficult to carry. So.
And what I really
Megan
like
wears Spanx.
Yeah, so whenever I'm wearing a tighter dress, so that I can't really carry appendix, or else I'll be printing, obviously printing. These shorts, they have the holster so that it is inside your thigh. And it's a little awkward because you have the gun, rubbing up against you in a weird way. But it's concealable, and it's definitely better than not carrying. So, I forgot the brand.
You can put it later in the comments.
Yeah, I can put it later in the comments.
I can't read that.
Yeah, I can't read it.
That's okay, stop looking.
I'll edit in the description. Oh yeah, and so what I used to carry, which I absolutely don't carry or use anymore too, I had this undercover tank top that had the under the arm, what do they call them? Side holster?
Yes. Did you like that? Because I was always, I never got that because I thought it would be uncomfortable with.
It was comfortable for me.
Okay.
Mostly because I'm right-handed, so I do things with my right, and my left is okay. But drawing is awkward, and people are gonna know that you're about to draw a gun. So let's say you're at a store, and someone's all of a sudden pulls out a gun and is holding up the store. This was actually the exact scenario that I figured this out in force-on-force training. you know, I had my hands here and I'm like, I can't reach for my gun. Like they're going to see movement when I try and draw my gun. But if I'm carrying appendix, you don't have to move your shoulder. It's just training so that you use the minimal amount of movement as possible when drawing your weapon. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of this. Again, it's better than nothing, especially if you wear a jacket all the time or something. But highly recommend appendix carry, and a lot of people complain about appendix carry because it's not comfortable. Well, the Berkut holster it's very comfortable. And I went hiking multiple times last year, and, you know, climbing things was perfectly fine. So.
Megan, are you a certified cop?
No, I would, for morality reasons, I would not choose that profession. I would not enforce the law, no.
So, what about other weapons? See, I carry about 3 or 4 knives with me all the time. This one is my favorite. I love spring-loaded. It's quick. I like that. I like that it's quick. I have 2 kids. I don't have a lot of time. So, and it's not just for fighting, it's utility. I like that. Use it mostly for utility because thank God I have not been in a life-threatening situation. Window breaker, love that. This is actually really good for cutting open car seat belts. So moms, these ridges are great for, I don't know if they have a name. Do they have a name, Sonny?
What's that?
Tac Force Speedster model.
I have no idea what it is.
I don't know, but it's spring-loaded, fast. They sold it to me with
Serrations.
serrations, car seat, seat belt cutters in case you get in that scenario. Window breakers. This is my favorite utility knife. It comes with a clip, so I like that. And then I have smaller. I have smaller knives and little pick knives. I have a Brutus Bulldog and some other things that I'm not going to tell you because a lady doesn't always tell all her secrets.
And I will admit, and I think this is a good topic to bring up, I don't carry a knife on me. I know that might surprise some of you because
I carry so much on me.
Not, at least not on my person. Sometimes I have one in my purse, but the reality is, and the reason I don't, and I think this is an important thing to discuss, is I don't think I could be comfortable using a knife. I've never, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I could use a gun, but a knife is a lot more personal, and, you want to carry something you can use. Of course, I will be pursuing more training on how to use a knife, but I don't now, so I'll be honest about that. I don't.
And I've thought about that too. We've had that discussion in training. This is a little bit graphic, but when you're, say you're in a situation and a gun, it does create that distance. There's that there's that distance. When you're using a knife, and I've never had to against a person, so thank God. But we all know that it goes in, and you will feel it, and it is more personal, and it's very intimate, and of course, as a mother, I'm saying whatever it takes, but I could imagine if it came to that there would be some lasting effects, psychologically that you'll have to deal with. I keep the knives. I've used them for utility purposes, so I do carry knives as well as a gun. But there is that to think about. You don't want to, if you go for the knife, you don't want to hesitate, and you do want to be aware that it is more intimate than using a gun against somebody.
There's two new questions.
There's two questions. I'm sorry.
Verbal de-escalation, and then next question.
Okay, can you recommend any verbal de-escalation techniques to prevent fights?
I think it really, it would depend on the situation. I mean, obviously, for example, in a rape scenario, if someone's really determined to attack you that way, I don't think you can de-escalate that situation without violence or without someone else present. If you are able to get someone else to enter the scenario that you trust, that would de-escalate the situation. But if it's like a confrontation, I think there's a way to... I haven't taken a lot of classes on the de-escalation stuff. I would suggest not being aggressive. Obviously using aggressive language. I don't know if you had experience with de-escalation.
I've had experience with avoiding, and I know that people who get into training, and I think this is more common among males. I'm sorry, it's a generalization, but we already discussed that we're different, men and women, that you can get that ego about you, that in training. So there are situations where avoiding, a possible fight that results in a death, it is best. You don't always want to go for a fight. So I've been in situations where I saw something that wasn't quite right, and I just avoided it. I've never been in a confrontation where it was in my face and I had to try to verbalize, I'm not even sure that would work unless, see, I'm a Christian, so I definitely believe in the power of prayer. I mean, I might start praying either out loud or silently in my head, but, and I've heard stories from Christians, of people calling out the name of God, and it changed the situation. I keep coming back to this, but I'm a mother, and I think less of trying to stop something verbally. Now, I will avoid a situation and try to get away from a situation because that's the smart and responsible thing to do. There's this misconception that gun owners or people in training are always looking for a fight. You're obsessed with violence. You want violence, and the leftist argument. 100% of the people, gun owners and people in training that I've met, 100% of them would rather not.
Would rather prevent.
Would rather prevent. So.
And another thing that I think would help, and this is just from, I'm not claiming to be a professional psychologist or anything. I studied psychology in school. Being solution-based, I think if someone's really angry at you and they're coming at you about something, if you are able to direct the conversation into finding a solution rather than just expressing your anger at each other, I think that could help in a confrontation, instead of just going back and forth on blaming each other, or I think telling them to calm down. I'm not quite sure that always helps because it's not really a solution.
That pisses women off.
Well, and it's not necessarily a solution. So I think if you're first of all, if you can get the problem out of the person, and then if you ask them questions about, okay, well, how do you think we should do this? it will set them off instead of saying, why are you so angry, and you need to calm down. So I think trying to steer it into a solution so that the conversation it puts them in a different mindset when they have to answer questions, and make sure your questions there's not a hint of an accusation in your question too, because that will really trigger people. Like, are you insinuating that I'm doing this? No, you.
Right, and I've heard some people on TV, whether it be Dr. Phil or Oprah or whoever, has all the answers. I've heard that, some people say you want to humanize the attacker, so you want to appeal to their humanity. I think that's wasting time, that you could be, thinking of an escape route or looking around your environment. One thing that I did want to talk about is using your environment. There was this amazing, again, fangirl, show, Agent Carter. And if you're familiar with Agent Carter and the history of Peggy Carter, if you've ever watched the show, and this is realistic, I'm not just saying this is a show and this is, she will use what's in her environment, whether it's a lamp or a kitchen knife, or in one episode she took somebody's hand and put it on a burner. So trying to humanize your attacker is probably wasting time when you could be looking around your environment and seeing what you can use. If you happen to not have a gun or a knife or any training at all. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think humanizing is a waste of time?
Well, I think you want to be as courteous as possible if it's still a verbal confrontation, obviously, but you want to be very
in that moment.
Yeah,
I guess.
and being aware of another thing too that I guess we could discuss is that the problem I see with a lot of martial arts is that it's set up as more of a game, to where there's certain rules. There's rules to what people can and cannot do, and how people can and cannot move. And when you're doing drills, that's fine because you're developing something, an attribute, but you can't get in this mindset to where you don't want to box yourself in, so that if you train under certain rules for so long, when you get into a real life situation, you're limiting your possibilities, because you're like, oh, I can only use my fists because I've only trained to use my fists. It's against the rules to grab or use something.
Right.
So don't do something that prevents you from being creative.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, so Peace, Love, and Anarchy says, since you are trained in self-defense, do you think this may lead to a hesitation in drawing your gun in a one-on-one situation? So I guess is that...
That's a good... So I guess the question is...
Do you go for hand-to-hand or do you go for your gun? Is that the question?
Like, what determines how lethal the force is that you're using? And I mean, we'll think of it this way. I mean, if it's a family member, for example, like
Drunk uncle.
yeah, like drunk uncle or something. No, if I know he's not going to kill me, no, I'm not going to draw my gun on my drunk uncle. But and this is why I think force on force training is really important to do, practicing real life scenarios, so that way you get more familiar with when is the time that I should draw my weapon, and should I draw my weapon. If me and Lacey got in a confrontation, I'd probably be more likely to go hands-on with her. I wouldn't draw my weapon. But
right.
If I would recommend, it's always better to be safe than sorry. If it's a complete stranger, that's, especially if, as a woman, if they're a lot bigger than you, and they're coming at you and they're threatening you, I would not hesitate to draw the weapon when someone is about to attack you. if it's someone you know personally, that's when I would probably go more hands-on. When I know for sure, well, I guess you can't ever know for sure, but when I know that they're not going to kill me or maim me, then...
Well,
yeah.
and I think it's situational also. So, in context of talking about women in self-defense, I'm a mother. Say I'm in a public place with my children. Somebody comes up to us in a threatening manner. Like I said before, I'd rather avoid a situation. Is there a way to avoid it? If not, then depending on the situation and how I'm being approached, if there's distance between us, enough distance, I can avoid. I can be like, I'm going this way. I can pull my phone out. I can start dialing 911. I can have that going while the conversation is going and I'm walking away. But if there is and you can sense it. We have these what do they call it? Losing my train of thought.
Instincts?
Instincts. You have these instincts that have been beaten out of us by political correctness. But listen to those instincts. And if you know that you know that you know, and you're a mother and you have children to protect,
In other words, don't be afraid to offend someone if you don't want to be around them. For example, women in Europe are being told that you are racist if you don't feel comfortable around a Muslim man. Or a group of Muslim men, apparently, because they're...
So I'm not saying always draw your weapon, but I'm saying don't hesitate to draw your weapon over, for political correctness. Now, we've talked in training about moments where, there are things that you can do to kind of show somebody that you mean business just with your hands. Just a little while ago, Megan came at me with a knife and I went, so there's some things that you can do to show that you mean business. Put somebody on a table or up against a wall and say you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this because it's not going to end well for you.
One thing that's definitely, it depends who you're with too. Obviously, you don't want to trigger someone to be more aggressive that way too.
I think that might be more. See, that's
you don't want someone to be like, okay, you want to go? Like some guy may kind of be messing with you, but if you kind of start to you provoke him a little bit because you get a little physical with him to warn him, that may provoke him to, instead of being in kind of like a playful mode, to be more aggressive.
I think that works probably more with men on men, so that's why I say it's situational. And I
think for women, the biggest advantage that we have, and I think the biggest advantage that we have is the element of surprise.
Yes.
Because men are expected to be able to defend themselves a little better. Women are not. They're also not expected to be carrying a weapon. So I think, it's all situational, but I wouldn't alert someone especially that you're carrying a firearm if you don't have to, because legally threatening someone could say, oh, this person threatened me with a gun, and the situation didn't escalate to when you had to use it. But if you have that element of surprise, they're not going to know that you have it, and you'll be able to properly defend yourself if it escalates to that point. Do you have other questions?
If we're not missing any questions, there was a pre-question about multiple attackers.
That's a very broad... Well, firearm would be ideal for those scenarios, obviously.
Is Sonny coming in with his expertise?
No, I'm just walking by.
Just walking by.
Oh, okay. Oh, so multiple attackers. I think that you would practice the avoidance technique first, but there are we talked about groundwork before we went live and how important groundwork
Yeah,
is.
more than likely with multiple attackers. I mean, this is not how the movies portray it happens, but you'll probably end up at the ground at some point.
Yes,
So,
and women, you're not going to be sparring off with men anyway, and you shouldn't be, because you're going to lose, and obviously that's just biology. But multiple attackers, you can't spar off with multiple attackers. You're going to end up on the ground. So what's really good with and then we talk about rape, not that all men rape, but if you're in that situation, multiple attackers or a rape scenario, you're going to end up on the ground. It's best to know how to maneuver your appendages, and we've worked on the ground where it's I'm trying to like demonstrate, but you can't see what I'm doing. Okay, on the ground where you're only kicking and you have to move around your attackers in kind of a circle of kicking and moving around, and then we've been on the ground with knives maneuvering around. So it's practice, it's training, it's learning your body, it's learning about your body and how it moves. Something may not work, and that's why you need to get in training, because you actually don't know a lot about your body. You don't know how your body works. You don't know how your body maneuvers. You don't know how it's going to react in a certain scenario. You need to be in training with people attacking you, multiple attackers at a time on the ground. You need to get comfortable being on the ground, which is a scary place to be because it feels very awkward. You don't feel in control of your body,
unless you're a jiu-jitsu person,
right.
then you love the ground. You want it to go to the ground,
but you need to be on the ground most of the time in a multiple attacker attack. You're going to get on the ground, and you're going to need to know how to fight from on your back. You know.
And I think what's important to realize in training is. In training, if you don't have a consequence, for example, when we do force on force training, when we're using force on force training using non-lethal rounds in firearms, when you shoot someone, there's a consequence of it's going to hurt. And so you actually learn that your body is not as fluid when you have that tension and that fear of consequence. So I think what's important in training for people to realize is that in training you're probably actually a lot more comfortable than you will be in a real life situation. So I'm not saying purposely try to injure each other, but try to apply enough pressure to where it creates that tension in your body, both mentally and physically, so that you learn.
Well, and if you do it halfway, say I was on the ground and somebody was attacking me from a standing up position. So my leg was kind of going to try to kick and hit underneath, like behind his knee. Now, I was not doing a very good job because, like you said, you don't want to hurt the person you consider your friend and your friend in training, but you want to apply enough force so that you're actually learning something. You get somebody behind the knee, even if you're on the ground and your legs are up and you're kicking around, and you get somebody behind the knee, apply enough force and you can get that person who is standing up on the ground. So I think for women it is important to know that it's like I don't know if you've ever rode a horse. I grew up around horses, but if you're afraid to kick the horse, he's not going to go. You need to get up. So it's don't be afraid. These men are bigger and stronger than you. I mean, don't just go wailing on them, but you need to know that there are certain areas of the body and certain ways that the body moves that you need to apply that pressure, because you can't overpower. If you try to overpower, it's not going to work. But when you maneuver and you learn how the biomechanics work, that's your gold ticket. Is learning the biomechanics.
Yeah, and if you're new, if you're new to a situation or to self-defense, as far as partnering up with people, I would suggest partnering up with someone who's very receptive to you, meaning that they can gauge how much pressure to properly apply to you. Don't necessarily just partner up with another female. That's usually tempting for women to want to partner with another woman. But, you know, choose someone who seems very receptive to you, who's not going to necessarily go easy on you, but when you train enough, you learn to gauge people on how much pressure do you apply to them, because training is, if you push someone too hard, they're not going to get anything out of it. If you don't push them hard enough, they're not going to get anything out of it. So there's a balance there. Do we have any other questions?
We don't have any other questions right now, but we were going to touch on, we touched a little bit on immigration. Did you want to mention the ad?
The 120 decibel.
The 120 decibels.
The hashtags that are going around. Okay, I'll give my little spiel on what I think about the hashtag #MeToo thing. In the social justice culture that we live in, victimhood is basically being treated as a currency. People are being motivated to say that they're a victim of this oppression or this oppression. And I don't see the #MeToo hashtag as very productive. People say it's like, oh, I'm raising awareness, but to me it's people wanting to join a collective victimhood status, as if that gives them some sort of belonging to a group. I think what's productive is finding a solution rather than dwelling on. I'm not saying, I'm not saying, blame the victim or don't self-reflect on stuff that has happened, but what can you do about it? I mean, just raising awareness about it isn't going to change anything. There's a new hashtag that we really like. It's hashtag 120db.
Yes, I just saw the video today. I shared it on my Facebook, and I want to explore it and maybe do a YouTube video on it. Sorry, Megan's channel. I talk about nationalism, and it brings up a real conversation that we need to be having of when we talk about self-defense, when we talk about personal responsibility. These women who, they might want to engage in personal responsibility. They might want to train. They might want to be individualist. But they have a flood of cultures coming in that do not value the Western values, and their government is telling them too bad and selling out their own people to cultures that are raping and killing them. And meanwhile, they can't have guns. They are being told that it's racist to train. They are being told it's racist to protect their lives. Whether you're a nationalist or an anarchist, I think we can both agree that something is happening, and it's very wrong. When we talk about personal responsibility, either from an anarchist or national standpoint, issue is squashing personal responsibility because these women can't even exercise personal responsibility. They're not given that option.
And the thing that's sad about this is that these women that are being raped and assaulted, the native population is being forced to, their tax money, the government is stealing from them to pay for these migrants to live in a place that they wouldn't be living in otherwise if they couldn't get that free money.
Right.
And to me, it's basically double rape. They're raping them by taking their money, and they're experiencing physical assault because of it.
Right. So look up the hashtag 120 dB, 120 decibels. I think they've got a good campaign going there against.
I like that it's a little bit more specific than Me Too.
And again, if feminists were really worried about rape, they would be.
They'd be focusing less on microaggressions in Western culture, and they'd be more worried about cultures around the world that think that
Right.
rape is okay. I mean, these people are being raised to think that it's okay in certain situations.
So, what do you think about open carry?
I'm not a huge fan of
Me
open
neither.
carry.
In Texas, in 2015, it became legal to open carry. As a mother, as a young woman, I do, we talked about that element of surprise. I'm not against anybody who wants to do that for themselves. It doesn't scare me. I grew up in the country with rifles in the back of pickup trucks in the high school parking lot. It doesn't scare me. It's just something that, for me, I do like that element of surprise.
And just to clarify, for me, when I say, and a lot of the anarchists and libertarians on my channel understand this, when I say I don't personally like it, that doesn't mean that I think it should be illegal. By all means, I think people should open carry if they want to. I don't like it because you're basically making yourself for a target for if someone wants to. They're going to know that you're carrying a weapon, and they're going to want to take you out first because they see that you're carrying a weapon, and so you are a threat. You're making yourself a target. Not a huge fan of open carry for that reason. I'll open carry if it's more comfortable. Like before the Berkut holster, it was more comfortable to carry another way, so I would open carry if I'm hiking because I'm not around a bunch of people anyway, so it's not going to set people off, or I'm not going to be targeted by other people.
Well, the other thing about it is I do have small children, so while I teach them gun safety at an age appropriate. Right now we're on BB guns. They're small children, and I grew up in a family of, you teach them young, you teach them gun safety young, so that they grow up knowing, this is the norm. This isn't something that's scary. This isn't, because if they don't know, then they're more likely to make a mistake and get into something that they shouldn't. So that's how I grew up. That's how I believe gun safety, age appropriate, but probably younger than some city liberals might be. But open carry for me, I just feel uncomfortable with it with my young children. I know they are very curious, and like I said, the harder holsters to kind of keep it a little bit more safe around smaller children. So I think it's also a safety issue for me, personally.
Yeah. Well,
actually, just two more things about Texas law. The Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground. I know you're an implant. She's an implant. Okay, so
from Utah. So, and being an anarchist / libertarian,
she doesn't like laws.
To me, it doesn't matter what the law is, but okay. You can share your thoughts, I guess.
Well, let's just say I love Texas because the castle doctrine means if somebody comes on your property, not just any property, but your property, that and you feel threatened. Now the law is, and this is, I kind of like how they wrote the law a little bit vaguely. If you feel threatened, then you can shoot on site on your property.
And anarchists and libertarians, they're very, protect your own property
Right.
rights, which I like that. I don't think it, yeah, anyway.
But the advice that you're going to get from cops, from law enforcement, from people who've been in the game, from people who have, faced those situations who might not be in law enforcement is, and I've heard this before, if you're questioned, I was afraid for my life, I want to speak to a lawyer. That's all you say. Don't say anything else. I was afraid for my life, I want to speak to a lawyer. That's the first thing you say.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a libertarian / anarchist, but in a legal sense, if you ever do have to defend yourself, I mean, I'll do a whole separate video on this later, but do not give cops too much information. If you did put yourself if you're in a situation where you had to defend yourself and the cops were called, ask to speak to your lawyer. Do not give,
Right.
I mean, the cops may be friendly, but anything you tell them can be used against you, and sometimes the cops won't even tell you that like they're supposed to. So
If you're nervous and you start rambling, it can get into a situation of, was this premeditated, So the stand your ground is basically saying, and this was written into law as well, you do not have a duty upon yourself to retreat.
it's
By
your own property. You don't have to leave your own property.
By law, you do not have to see a threat on your property and plan to avoid retreat, show evidence that, and this is Texas. In other states, it's different. I think California has a different law, of course.
Of course.
But in Texas, we have the castle doctrine and the stand your ground. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Let me check the chat.
We've probably gone on for, I'm not sure how long.
Hour and a half.
An hour and a half. Okay, yeah, we should probably,
Hour and 20 minutes.
okay, we should probably end it here soon.
Yes.
Flora says California is its own hippie planet.
California is its own hippie planet. I think that California has produced Barbara Billingsley and Ronald Reagan. So, yay for them. Otherwise,
They also produced, what's the other one?
who's the other? The
Nancy
third good
Nancy
person.
Pelosi.
Oh, Nancy.
Oh no!
Oh,
yeah.
If you have not, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, the memo has been released.
The memo.
The memo, yes. Everyone knows what you mean by when you say the memo by now. Actually, probably when we get off of here, I'm going to do more research. I'm actually going to read that memo and see what's in it.
Well, we hope you all learned a little bit, and I hope that we've inspired some women to go into self-defense training. It's not as scary as it seems. Take those cuts, bruises, and scars as a badge of honor, and protect your babies. They need you. And get home alive. The thing that you should take away from this is, the most important thing is that you get home to your family alive. And make training realistic again.
And, by the way, personal experience, when you wear these t-shirts, you may trigger a few people because they think you're wearing a Make America Great Again t-shirt, so that's another added benefit.
Pearls trigger people.
Well, have a t-shirt, Berkut holster, and a Glock. And you're good.
Yeah, so I want to thank you all for joining us for this live feed, and thank you, Lacey.
Oh, you're welcome.
I wanted to have another woman on so that we could have a good discussion about women in self-defense. So let me know what you liked about this video. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section, and that way I can gauge what videos to do in the future. So thank you.